Crunch is one of the biggest problems in the games industry right now. Pretty much every developer will go through crunch at some point in their game development, and it's having a real impact on people that are making our games. And recently, a group of developers sat down at a conference in Poland to talk about the crunch problem.
Speaking at the Digital Dragons conference in Poland this week, developers from Bungie, Naughty Dog, Sony Santa Monica and Blizzard sat down to talk about crunch in the games industry. For those who are unfamiliar, crunch is not just biting biscuits. Crunch is a term used to describe the long and stressful working hours that developers go through in order to meet a deadline. For example, Telltale Games were recently outed for their crunch culture, which allegedly had a serious impact on the quality of their games. And not too long ago, we covered the story of the developers of Night in the Woods, who said they almost worked themselves to death to finish their game. So back to the topic at hand, the first developers to speak at the conference was Bungie's Jason Sussman, who said the studio had a zero crunch policy. Quote, "We have a zero punch..."
That would be good
no
as well.
punch quality.
That would be
no
good
punches
as well.
either.
No punching,
no
no
crunch,
crunching.
no punch. We have a zero crunch policy, so we do not allow crunch or punch. I see my guys working late, I question them. People are passionate, and if they have something where like, man, I just can't go home until I get this thought out of my head, that's fine. But if I see you doing that for too long, then it's like, hey man, I don't want you to get burned out. It just results in less productivity, and I don't think people can maintain that level of creativity if you're killing yourself like that.
After Sussman finished speaking, Andrew Maximov from Naughty Dog, a company that wasn't too long ago accused of excessive crunching themselves, took to the spotlight. Maximov said Naughty Dog haven't found the same balance that Bungie have, and for them, crunch is usually the result of passionate developers who really care about their work. Maximov also said crunch is never mandated at Naughty Dog, and no one is ever told to stay late, but people do it because they truly believe in their work. Next up was Daniel Basinski from Sony Santa Monica, who said the studio still has periods of crunch, but things are changing. Basinski said he can see upper management starting to realise the effect crunch has on people, saying, quote, "I've seen people get burnt out a lot and it's not worth it. It depends on the studio and the culture of the studio, but I see progress for the environment I work in." The final person to speak at the conference was Blizzard's Diego Klafka, who spoke about the effect crunch can have on mental health. Klafka said, quote, "We have to take care of our mental health because we have put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We want to make better stuff. We want to get better faster, and that's something that burns you out. You've got to be careful with that. You've got to learn to enjoy the process, and when you're working, try not to be overthinking. Oh, I'm slow and I can't do this. It's hard, but if you can do that, you burn out much more rarely." So, these developers seem to think the industry's crunch problem is getting better, albeit slowly, but there is still a long way to go before crunch becomes a thing of the past. We did a crunch video recently with an indie developer who were doing Night in the Woods, and that was them themselves. They were the workhorses. This is the big dogs, the AAA industry, and this is like upper management level people talking about sort of their staff and their company, rather than a couple of people in a little sweatbox room talking about going through it personally. So, I don't know, a little different take on the same thing, crunch. I don't know how many of them have been through it themselves. They didn't really get too personal with that. They were more talking about, well, they were spokespeople for the companies that they work for, really, weren't they?
Yeah.
We're doing this at Blizzard, and at Naughty Dog, we never do crunch, even though allegedly there was a lot of crunching going on. They're kind of saying, nope, that didn't happen.
So touching on this subject again, it's obviously a big problem for the industry. Now, specifically here, a couple of people are talking about what causes crunch, right? And one specific example was that people just want to get ideas out of their head. They want to work late because it's a creative industry, right? They want to finish off the idea that they've got and not go home and leave it till the next day, because the next day the idea might not be the same. You've just got to get to the end of what you're doing, otherwise it might be gone the next day. The other thing that was touched on here was crunch can leave you less creative or cause problems in your work, right? Because you can imagine like a long haul driver or something. They've got set regulations how long they can work before they need a rest. Why? Because they endanger people's lives because they might fall asleep or whatever. So in this industry, I'm curious as to how it affects creators' work. Just working long periods, right? Because if you work like a 13, 14 hour shift or whatever, even if it's in the creative industry, how much of that work is top notch, right? As opposed to if you had a well-rested night's sleep or whatever, and you go back the next day, how good is that work versus how you would have been if you'd have been well-rested? That's an interesting, it's hard to quantify, right?
This is interesting because we've seen 3 companies talk about it from 3 different point of views. So Bungie were just basically like, no, we have like no sort of zero tolerance on crunch. I like that because they're acting like they're being the good guys by letting their staff go off on time. Good.
We are the good guys.
Well done,
Bungie.
Yeah, well done for not forcefully keeping your employers.
Maybe that says something about their games.
Yeah.
Maybe they should keep their employees in the office a little bit longer. That was a joke.
Yeah.
Don't do that, Bungie.
Yeah. No slavery ever. Naughty Dog, they were just saying like, oh, well, it's not crunch, it's just passionate developers. Now, this is touching on what Night in the Woods developers were saying about it, because they said that this is the whole problem. People acting like it's the cool thing to do. Like, I remember in our Night in the Woods video, there was a lot of people in the comment section talking about how bad they've got it. You know, oh, I work 16-hour shifts. But that's the equivalent of somebody with no arms going up to somebody who's just lost an arm and going, pussy, I've got no arms. That's what it sounds like, see? That's what Night in the Woods are saying the problem is, and that's what this Naughty Dog developer's kind of doing there, saying, oh, it's just passion. And then the guy at the end was saying, that passion will f*** you up, your mental health, blammo. But the only company that were not really like anti-crunch are the ones that were accused of crunching. So, looks like another conversation about crunch, this time in the AAA industry. What do you guys reckon? Is it as much of a problem as everyone's saying? Let us know down in the comment section below. Why didn't you like the video if you enjoyed it? Subscribe if you're new around here. There's more content on the screen. This way or this way, I always forget. So let's go this way. And there's a link to our Patreon as well if you want to support the channel. Until then, we'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.